A special meal can take you back to another place and time. Our brains are hardwired this way, bringing smell and taste together and linking with emotion to take us on a trip that can span decades. The meal that I am sharing with you today is in several of my childhood memories, from the last Thanksgiving with my dad, to a high school athletic banquet, to the house I grew up in, and even stories of how my grandma procured this recipe the day she had her first bite. Today, with spring just around the corner, Easter lilies in bloom, I'll add another core memory around this meal. Not only did I make it with the help of my daughters, but I had to run out and protect my chickens from a dog attack in the middle of filming. Never a dull moment around here. After everyone took time to stop and smell the gorgeous flowers, it was time to jump in and get to work. The first recipe I'm preparing is a sweet meatball, courtesy of my sour aunt. We all know we have them, right? Usually, this meal takes 3 pounds of ground beef, but in this case, I'm just going to use 1 pound each of venison, pork, and beef. Whatever combination of ground meats you have will typically work just fine. To the meat, we're going to go ahead and add some binding ingredients. So first up is oatmeal. Now these are the quick oats. You can use rolled, but quick is what I had on hand, so that's what we're going to use. Next, I'm adding heavy cream. Now the recipe itself does not call for heavy cream, but calls for Milnot, which isn't something you can easily find, and I'm not even sure that if it's still made. So that tells you a little bit about the date of this specific recipe and how far it goes back with my family. With a bit of internet research, I had seen that the closest thing to Milnot is actually evaporated canned milk. But since we had some heavy cream in the fridge, I tried to use up the ingredients I have and not go to the store for a single ingredient. Now, in the past, I've let things like this derail my entire recipe or just say I couldn't make something based on not having a key ingredient. But the more comfortable I've gotten in the kitchen, the more I realize there's a substitute for almost anything or a way to make an ingredient that will work really closely. So I would just encourage any of you, if you're still stuck in that phase of feeling like you have to follow a recipe specifically, you can let that go and still turn out with a really beautiful recipe. To the cream and the oats, we're going to add diced onions, salt, pepper, and garlic salt. It wouldn't be a meal cooked in my kitchen if I actually completed the entire process by myself. So here comes my tiniest helper climbing up to make sure she has access to put in the final ingredient. Garlic salt poured courtesy of Little Miss 2-year-old and her independent streak in full force. The final addition to our bowl is going to be 2 of our farm fresh eggs. Once we get those in, a good mix to all of the ingredients, but making sure not to overmix. If you do overmix meatballs or any similar product, you will get something a little more dense than what you're looking for. So once the ingredients are evenly distributed, you want to go ahead and stop and get your balls formed. Now, traditionally, I turn off all of the audio when I'm filming a video like this. But upon review, when I was editing, some of this content is just so good. So if you will bear with me for just a moment, I'm going to let my little one come on and tell you a few details about what's going on in our process.
Mix up, and then
Says, watch Mama make a mess.
yeah.
Yeah? Do you like that book? Can you hold it up and show them the book? It's Meatballs.
Meatballs.
So good.
Mom making a mess up that's full.
That's what the recipe says. Mom's making a mess.
Yeah.
I don't know if I agree with that. Now she's 2.5, so she's not actually reading yet. That means when she did tell me that I needed to add the chocolate chips, I definitely left them out. That said, I can't help but love working alongside my girls. It just really, really does my heart good to listen to them and chatter with them the whole entire time. Now, when I was stirring up the meat, a little piece came out on the counter and she couldn't help but help me. So we had to stop and do a good wash down of both of our hands before we moved on to the next step, which was getting the meatballs all put together into their individual pans so we could prepare them for baking. 15 to 20 years ago, my mom set out to make a recipe book which held all of our family favorite recipes. That's the book that she was just reading from. This recipe, as well as the next one, both come from this book. I'll put those recipes down in the description for you as my new friends. My hope is that you're interested in taking a trip with me through this book and the stories that accompany it, through a series that I'm planning called What's for Dinner. If you don't mind, can you comment down below either way? While this series is actually a form of a love letter to the women that built me, I want to make sure that I hear from you as well before I take the time to make this possible. Jumping back to the recipe at hand, several of the women in my current generation of our family have differing preferences on the proper size of a meatball. You're welcome to weigh in below. Some love large meatballs, which provide a full serving, while others like smaller with more sauce per bite. I happen to fall into the latter group. The sauce that we will make soon for these is the best topping for mashed potatoes that I can ever recall, and it will also lead to one very sloppy plate. The scoop that I choose to use is about 3 tablespoons as an approximation. If you are interested in a scoop or wanting to look at one, I will link the one that I'm using here down below. Now, just a little precursor, it's getting ready to get very exciting at our house. So here comes some more volume, live in action of what actually goes on behind the scenes. The chickies are going crazy out the window.
Yeah. Not going crazy, crazy, crazy.
Crazy chickies.
Yeah.
I think they like their new spot over there on the side, don't you?
Yeah.
Oh, there was a dog. Ah! Ah! Hey! You get out of here.
Gosh dang it! Yeah, the dog! Yeah, the doggy thing.
The footage that I'm showing you now is one that I took earlier in the day when they were out exploring their new space. But needless to say, our electric fence saved them from a dog who was out running around town. We didn't lose any this time, but the girls' favorite chicken ever, Barbie, was not so lucky last fall. As a result, my little one here has a lot to say about dogs getting around her chickens. We're actually considering getting a Great Pyrenees for protection for our animals, but also for our house. If you have any experience with them, can you let me know your thoughts on what you think about them around small children? That's really my only hesitation. Our kids, all except the baby here, have been around dogs in the past because we had a Weimaraner for over a decade, but he passed just a couple years ago or right after she was born, and so we haven't had a dog around here in quite a while, but it looks like we're needing something for protection for sure. My husband and our boys have been spending the weekend working on updates down at our baseball field here in town, and they stepped in after the fun with the dog had just finished. But trust me, they got all of the details here from baby sister. Jumping back to our recipe, I do want to share one tip that is of vital importance while I'm filling up this pan. This recipe with the 3 pounds of meat will actually do more than this 9 by 13 pan, so I'm going to add an extra 8 by 8 that I will end up covering and putting in the freezer for a later meal. This whole entire recipe is going to be about 3 full meals for our family. We'll eat half of this pan today, saving the half for later in the week, and then, of course, putting that other, as I said, back in the freezer. One thing you do not want to do is try to shove more in this pan by staggering your rows. Yes, you can physically get more in there, but the cooking time will be off, which is a firsthand experience from an athletic banquet that we showed up to, trying to bring as many as possible to serve all of the friends that we had coming. They weren't quite done in the middle, so definitely make sure that you get that completely finished and don't try to stack them all in. Next up is our sauce preparation. And I actually feel like I need to add a little bit of a disclaimer for those that know me personally. I do not tend to use a lot of sugar in our house at all, but these childhood recipes are a totally different animal. While the main ingredient in this recipe is ketchup, it also includes diced onions, liquid smoke, and a healthy serving of brown sugar. Now it's time to teach her one of the most important parts of cooking, which is obviously taste testing. This recipe is one that even as a kid, I always couldn't wait to have my turn to lick the bowl just a little bit. So after a couple taste tests each and trying to help her keep her shirt out of the bowl, it was time to go ahead and use this sauce for its actual purpose, which was topping the meatballs. Now, I did go ahead and give these each a really generous topping to make sure that each of them had enough, like I was saying earlier, to provide some extra sauce for the potatoes that we're going to serve alongside this. Now, I'm using a 9 by 13 stone baker, which has a stone lid that doubles as a serving tray, and it helps to keep the moisture in. If you don't have a dish with a similar lid, you could use one of the silicone lids that fit on 9 by 13 pans or go with tin foil. I personally try to avoid both. I know silicone is supposed to be safe, but in my heart of hearts, I feel like it's going to be 15 or 20 years before we find out down the road that they're actually not as safe as we think they are right now. As for the foil, I tend to avoid it at all cost. I feel like I can usually taste foil in foods that have been reheated or baked that way, and I don't like the idea that I can taste a metal in the foods that I'm serving my family. The beauty of spring is egg abundance, and that leads us right into our next menu item of the day, which is deviled eggs. We are going to use the Instapot for a hands-off approach. So I put about 18 eggs here in the pot. Some will be a snack all week long, while others will be used in this specific recipe. The easiest method that I have found for hard-boiled eggs is what's called the 5-5-5 method. That means 5 minutes in the Instapot on high pressure, 5 minutes of natural release, followed by a 5-minute ice bath. Now, that was the goal for the day, but not the outcome. We have neighbors that come down every few weeks to spend a weekend on the property beside us, and they are amazing and always down for a good chat. We saw them out the back door and took them a dozen eggs. After we took a few minutes to catch up, and I came back inside, that 5 minutes that was supposed to be our cool down had quickly turned into a 14-minute natural release. The great news is they still turned out fine, even with the extra time. Now, when there is a fun or messy job to be done, the sister crew is always ready to jump in. Today, I got to teach them all how to easily remove the shell by smashing that egg on the counter and giving it a good roll all over, even on both ends, before popping the egg out and rinsing it off in water. It actually works like a charm every single time, so if you're having problems, just make sure to roll them around thoroughly and get that shell all cracked up. They'll come out in no time. A quick story for you on the eggs in our cookbook page. My grandma never measured, so neither did my mom. Mom's didn't quite taste the same as grandma's and vary greatly from each time we made them. I was probably close to about 10 when I asked my mom if there's any way she could just find a recipe to make them taste the same every single time. She laughed and we looked one up, and they have turned out perfectly every time since, just like grandma used to make them. On another note, I have a cousin who is known as eating the most deviled eggs ever. So when we took these to a family event, we had to make sure to do at least 3 or 4 total eggs just for him because he loved them so much. And we actually started to wonder if he was even taking the time to taste them and enjoy the flavor because he took them down so frequently and so many at a time. While we finished up with the eggs, the timer went off for the meatballs, so our full hour had passed, and oh my goodness, they look so, so good. And the smell when I opened that pan took me straight back to being around my girl's age when I got my first taste of these beautiful meatballs myself. I mentioned before that we love to eat this meal with mashed potatoes, but today I'm not actually making mashed. I went ahead and refilled our Instant Pot with some regular potatoes that I could bake or put in the Instant Pot instead because they are so super easy and my kids really, really love them. We put in extras so we'd have some to eat for the rest of the week as well, and that turns out to be a really huge hit. So to do those, they're 18 minutes at high pressure and then a 10-minute natural release. While those are cooking, we went ahead and finished up the eggs. First, cutting them all in half and then getting the centers into a small bowl. Now, as we all know, the actual whites are not super sturdy, so letting this lady help me push them out led to a few casualties, but she was all too happy to go ahead and just eat them herself during the process. Good thing I made some extras because we would have ran a little bit short on this meal. When we were actually finished and putting everything away, there was one left on the plate, so we did the perfect amount to have them ready to go. After a quick mix, it was time to add the ingredients. We're starting off here with a homemade mayo, followed by mustard, vinegar, salt, pepper, and added to the already smashed up yolks. I will go ahead and put this recipe down below. I'm sure many of you have your own deviled egg recipe, but this one turns out really, really good every single time. Once completely mixed, the next project is getting those eggs stuffed in a way that makes them look as delicious as they taste. We've tried many options for this throughout my life, but what I've landed on is grabbing a gallon Ziploc bag and going ahead, turning it inside out, and scooping all of the filling into that bag before turning it right side out, keeping everything inside. I have tried this before with quart-sized bags, and what I end up having is a mess all over the zipper and not being able to get the bag inverted without making a really big mess. Once everything is firmly inside, you just need to slide all of it down toward one corner. When you get that accomplished, you can snip an end off. Now, my little one is really hopeful that she's going to manage this all by herself. She's reminding me that she watched me do the same thing to the cupcake icing and she thinks she can handle it. In the meantime, I'm thinking perhaps she needs a little bit of help. She's actually the one who mashed up the yolks. I did help her slightly, but I knew there were going to be a couple pieces in there that were a little bit large. When you're snipping off the end of this bag, you want to take a pretty small section off so you don't get a lot out at a time. But when you do that, sometimes if there's a little bit of chunk in there, it can really slow the process of filling them up, which actually did happen to us. So I went ahead and got started, and then she jumped in before the time was up to make sure she could get her own mark on these beautiful eggs. Memories are made in the kitchen, and this cookbook is a valuable part of our family and will be passed down for generations to come. I'd like to take a minute to encourage you to make a cookbook like this for your friends and family. If you're from the generation above mine or similar age as my mom, you have so many treasures in your family, and with them being written down, as well as the stories that go along with them, it will give your children and grandchildren something to cherish for years to come. If you've made it this far in watching us prepare one of our own family meals, please make sure to leave me a note in the comments if you'd like to see more of our family recipes just like this. Also, if you want to see more of what's going on in my kitchen, make sure to subscribe on your way out, and also check out this link of other recipes that we made previously. Until next time, bye friends.